Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Welcome to the Even Better podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Sinikka Waugh, and we're delighted to have you today. Welcome to our guest, Helene Fein, who is the Executive Director of the Iowa Literacy Council. Helene, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
This is such a joy. If you are just joining us today, to our listeners, thank you so much for being here. I am delighted to have you to have a chance to just get to hear Dr. Fein speak. She's brightened my days these last few weeks as I've had the opportunity to get to know her and to learn more about her. So let me introduce her just a little bit, and then we'll hear what she's talking to us about. So Dr. Fein has had this luxuriously long career in education. And right now I've met her because she is the executive director of the Iowa Literacy Council. And I am just so thrilled with the things that she knows about change. And that's part of what sparked our conversation, is about change. But I know that she has a background in education and in teaching in all levels. And I think her teacher's heart is going to shine through. And I think you'll hear that or as you listen to her share. But she has, for a number of years, she was the conference coordinator for the Iowa Culture and Language Conference. She has graduate degrees from Drake University and Iowa State. Her most recent degree is a PhD in educational leadership and policy. I'm intrigued and I hope she'll tell us more about her book titled Necessary Conversations About English Language Learners, which brings together her career passions, communication and English language learning. So language learning in particular, and in communication are clearly things that are areas of passion for Helene Fein, for Dr. Helene Fein. And I am enthralled with the moments that we've spent together, and clearly her interest in listening to people, clearly in her ability to ask questions and learn more, and clearly in her ability to discern what's next. And I have been delighted in that, and just in the little bit of time that I've spent with her. And so I can't wait to hear what's next for what she has to share with our listeners. So Helene, share a little bit more about your story. What would you have our listeners know about you and the work you're doing today at the Iowa Literacy Council?
Well, as the executive director, I coordinate the summer conference. That's one of my big roles. But we are a state association, and we are affiliated with the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, COABE, which is an international organization. So I am the liaison between the Iowa group and the COABE. So newsletters, keeping mostly community college staff informed, because in Iowa, most of our adult literacy programs are through the community colleges. So I work with them and just try to support professional development and keep them informed about opportunities, national opportunities that might come up, student awards, student opportunities to further their education and start careers. So, but I have to tell you that you brought a memory forward for me when you said I taught at all levels, because many, many years ago, it was my first day of substitute teaching after graduating from college, and I taught in a kindergarten class for which I was totally unprepared. And here were all these darling little kids. It was the day before Thanksgiving. I had no clue what to do. And on top of that, I had a splitting headache, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do something just bizarre. So there was a bell on the desk, and I said, okay, kids, all day, anytime I ring the bell, I want you to make the noise that a turkey makes. So I would ring the bell, and then I would hear these gobble, 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 gobble. And I thought, I never told the teacher that I did that. And I wonder when she came back to school the following week, and she rang that bell, and all those little darlings went gobble, 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 gobble. So That was my kindergarten experience, and fortunately, my only kindergarten experience. Not my strong suit, I have to admit. Anyway, I am excited to be talking about communication and coaching because most of my career, in some capacity, I have worked in these areas, and when you put them together, it's magic. So I'm really thrilled to be talking about it. Some of the more challenging communications I've had, I've coached principals of schools and sat with them in front of the room and helped to unpack their thinking about why they were making big changes in the school so that the staff could hear where these changes were coming from and how the principal felt about what the changes were going to bring to the school. I also have coached students, PhD students who are working on their trying to decide what to do their dissertations on, and they have a million ideas, and we sit down and I coach them and I listen, and they trust me, and I ask good questions, and they walk away with a plan. They know what they want to work on because it's so important to have a topic, because then every class you can work on that topic. So those are the things I'm going to be talking about today.
So the summary of this topic is 4 things you've learned that are most important about effectively communicating and coaching. And I think as we unpack that, let's unpack a couple of these topics. And you've gotten right into coaching. Let's unpack that a little bit. What is coaching to you? How do you define coaching, or where does coaching play out in your life?
Coaching is conveying a person or a group of people from where they are to where they want to be. Not where I want them to be, not where society wants them to be, but where they want to be. And as the coach, I am the foundation or the support that helps to convey them from one place to another.
You're still at that hang that. I am. I'm just smiling. Can you just say that again? Coaching is conveying a person. Just say it one more time. It's so beautiful.
Coaching is conveying a person or group of people from where they are to where they want to be. And it could be short term, it could be by tomorrow I want, or it could be in 5 years I want, or it could be by the end of my life I want. Where do you want to be? And what do you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I love that. And so in our lives, we encounter coaching conversations. There is a formal practice of coaching, and there are coaches, there are certified coaches, and I employ several of them. There is a practice, there is a profession of coaches. And I'm also going to say right now that many of our listeners will find themselves in moments where they are involved in a conversation where they must help coach an individual that they're talking to. And so this is why, as a skill in communicating, I believe that we can all stand to get better in communication. And I believe that we can all stand to get better in coaching skills. Is that a fair ask of us?
It is, definitely. And honestly, one of the big problems is when you become very skilled in coaching, there aren't a lot of people you can go to be coached. You have to find somebody who can remove themselves from the conversation, where they're focused entirely on you and where you are and where you want to be. And that gets difficult when you're a skilled coach, because you have to find another coach who's as skilled as you are, or even more skilled.
For sure. So even in our day-to-day conversations as humans, might some of our listeners, so in a day-to-day conversation, there are lots of opportunities for us to be communicating, right? Many communications happen. We conduct transactions at grocery stores. We engage in communications with our colleagues all the time. We engage in communications with our parents, with our children, with our spouses. Is it fair to say that as leaders in our organizations, we engage in coaching with our employees? As parents, we engage in coaching with our kids. We engage in coaching with our siblings, with our spouses. We engage in these conversations. And so if we can get better as humans in our day-to-day communication skills, and I'm making an impassioned plea here, and maybe I don't mean to ask leading questions, but I kind of am. I'm making an impassioned plea here, because I think that what I'm begging our listeners to hear, and why I want us to just stop and listen here, is getting better at coaching should be for all of us. This is not reserved just for those who have made a profession in coaching. Getting better at communicating is for all of us. Getting better at coaching is for all of us.
Mm-hmm. There's an intentionality about coaching. So I may be wearing my parent hat, but if one of my children comes to me with a problem or with something they want to talk about, then I may need to move my parent hat over and put on my coaching hat as well. I need to remember that I'm not only being a parent in that moment, but I am also being a coach. And honestly, there were times when my kids would just look at me and say, Mom, quit it, because they knew what I was doing. And after they got over it, then they would, proceed to engage with me in conversation. But there's an intentionality to it. It's not necessarily off the cuff.
Okay, so let's get to the how-to.
Okay.
Let's get to the how-to. So how do we do this? There are 4 things that you've learned that are most important about effectively communicating and coaching. So the first one that you articulated is listening. Unpack that for us. What does it mean to listen?
Sometimes listening can be painful. Sometimes listening can be extremely urgent or important. I'm going to use an example as I talk about listening of when one of my children went off to college. My children attended a high school in a community where life was in the fast lane. I mean, there were parties with alcohol and staying out late and bonfires and all sorts of things like that. And when one of my children went off to college in a neighboring state, and she called me after about a week, and I said, How are things going? And she said, Mom, the police in this community are a lot nicer than the police in the community where I grew up. And I am sure my hair stood straight up and my eyes crossed. And I thought, what I say next is going to be crucial to the communication between me and my daughter in the future, especially since she is living away from home and I can't necessarily, that was before FaceTime and Zoom calls, I could not see her and tell from body language how she was doing. It was crucial for me to hear her words to know how she was. So I thought, what do I say? How do I react? How do I make sure that communication was open in the future? So there are 3 types of listening that one needs to avoid when you are in a communication situation or a coaching situation. And I try to avoid these all the time. The first one is, that happened to me too. Let me tell you about it. Because what does that do to the other person? It immediately shuts them down. And then they have to sit there and politely listen to your tale of woe or experience. Another type of listening that I try to not do is asking questions while the person is still talking. My mind is working like, oh, gee, I can't wait to find out more. So I'll say, what color was that dress? And how did you like the guy? What do you think about it? Do you think there's a future there? I mean, unnecessary, because that also shuts somebody down. Their train of thought is over. And the third one is when I begin to say, here is what you need to do. And I start giving advice. That also will shut down the communication. So with the situation at school, I thought I had to think quickly. And I said, it's a very intriguing comment. Tell me more. And because of that, I left it open-ended. I wasn't judging her. I wasn't criticizing her. I wasn't asking for details. I wasn't telling her what she needed to do. Like, are you crazy? Why are you telling me that the police are better there than here? It was leaving it open. And you know what? We have the best communication between daughter and mother. And that was over 20 years ago. And it's wonderful. And I think because I listened to her. I truly listened. And we can do that consciously during the day and just make sure that we don't do those listening set asides that I mentioned.
What a lovely story of success. I think any one of us listening could point to moments when we when we did one of the three that we're not supposed to, right? Is there hope? If we did one of the ones we're not supposed to, like we can go back and we go, oops.
Definitely, you could just say, wait a minute, let's hear more about what you want to say. And you can go back, there will come a time in the conversation where you might want to give advice, where you might want to tell about your personal experience or ask a question. That's fine, because that's what, communication between two or more people, that's what it is. But wait until that person has finished talking.
Wait until they're ready.
Listen. Yes.
Listening.
Yes.
Right. So a second thing that you learned as most important about effectively communicating and coaching is question formation. What do you mean by that?
I rarely ask a yes or no question, even in my personal life, rarely, because I'm going to get one word and it's really not going to tell me all that much. So the first thing you need to do is to decide whether you're probing or inquiring. If there's something you want to know, you're inquiring. If you're trying to help that person go deeper into what they were saying, then you're probing. So inquiring is simply when you want more information, and probing is when you want to go deeper. So I like to probe when I feel that that person has more to say than they're saying originally. And the inquiring comes again after I listen and after the person has finished talking. There are some other ways when you communicate that go along with good question formation. Pausing. We always want to jump on and say the next thing and say it right away. But if you pause after somebody talks, you allow that person to collect their thoughts and decide if there's anything else they want to say. And you allow yourself to think, am I ready? Is this conversation ready for me to ask more questions or to probe or to offer advice? Or to simply just continue to listen. So pausing is extremely important. Occasionally, I paraphrase when I'm in a communication situation or a coaching situation, not like we used to do in the 70s and 80s. What I hear you saying is, I mean, that's such an obnoxious statement, but more like, so you're thinking that blank, 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 or it sounds like you have these concerns. And by that short paraphrase, don't go on and say everything the person said, but by that short paraphrase, you give that person the opportunity to correct you. You may have misheard him or her completely, or you may have taken it to a depth that they don't want to go. So paraphrasing is important, but don't do it after every single thing that they say, and don't paraphrase at length. A third thing is thinking positively about the person. Try not to be judgmental. Try to just keep an open mind. So those are all connected to asking good questions. When you ask a question, it's important to pause and don't ask another follow-up question right away. Give that person time to answer the question.
You gave an example with your daughter, I think, of the listening and then the question formation. That's intriguing. Tell me more. That's a good example of a question formation. That's intriguing. Tell me more. That's an open-ended. It's not going to be answered with a simple yes or no. It's a non-judgmental. There's a pause there, right? You probably left a little space. Tell me more.
I was wiping my brow and trying not to pass
out. Your jaw above the floor.
Right.
Oh my goodness gracious. So people who use a lot of words, I'm going to put myself firmly in that category. So I'm just going to ask for counsel here, see if you've got any ideas for folks like me who use too many words. Often when I go to ask a question, I'll be afraid that maybe I haven't worded the question just right. So I'll word it one way and then I'll try it again a different way. And then I'll try it again a third way. And I'll ask the question 3 different ways. And here I'll try it again. And I'll ask the question maybe a 4th way. And I'll ask a question I'm demonstrating right now. I'll ask this question 5 different ways. And then I'll say, so what do you think?
The famous, what do you think? If you paused after the first question, you would know, especially if you were standing next to the person you were asking, you would know right away whether your question was formed in a way that's going to get a response. If they look at you with squinted eyes and a confused expression, then you'll know, and you could be very intentional and say, let me reword that so it's a little more, it's clearer for you. I mean, you can do that as a communicator. You don't, nobody's perfect. And probably it's helpful to the communication if you're not perfect and if you show that you're willing to, have a blip and maybe do a correction.
So, if you are just joining us, we are here on the Even Better podcast with Dr. Helene Fein, and we are talking about 4 things that she has learned and are sharing with us are most important about effectively communicating and coaching. The first 2 that she shared so far are listening and question formation. And we're going to move on to number 3 here. And this third one is so important. And I'm just really, really can't wait to dig into this third one. The third one is trust. Okay, let's go there. How do we build this? How do we build this?
Well, if you think back to the example I gave of my daughter and the police, then trust is crucial, because if she didn't trust me, she never would have told me about the situation that she was talking about. And she certainly would not have let me probe with a question like, that sounds intriguing, tell me more. She would have said, gotta go, mom, or I don't want to say any more about it. So there has to be a trusting relationship with communication. And included in that are things like respect. And the other person needs to feel that you're competent in your coaching or in your communication ability, and integrity. That includes confidentiality, that includes non-judgmental behavior and signals, and just having a personal regard for the other person, like you really are interested in what they have to say. So those are some of the components of trust. So there are 4 different kinds of trust that I like to talk about. The first one is trusting yourself. So I met with somebody recently who was trying to decide whether she should go back to school or not. And she was really worried about it. But she wanted to know if her work would be, if somebody felt it was important for her to have an advanced degree in the work that she did. And I said to her, when you go to somebody who has your credentials, would it make a difference to you? Or what difference would it make to you if that person had an advanced degree? And she really thought about it for a while, and she said it would make a huge difference. So trusting in yourself to make good decisions is very, very important. And keeping that in mind when you're coaching or when you're communicating, that that person needs to trust them in themselves. So if they are demonstrating or talking about examples of how they lack confidence in making the right decision, coming up with questions that are going to help them trust themselves would make a big difference for them. The other one is trusting in relationship. And, this comes over time and it has to be proved. You need to demonstrate that you can be trusted in a communication situation. And certainly that involves keeping to yourself what the other person is saying, not bringing in examples of other people that that person might find objectionable. So you need to have trust in your relationship. The third one is trusting in a process. And it makes me think back to the evaluation process at a job that I had. And it involved me sitting and listening to the other person talk for half an hour about many different things. And sometimes she would go back to her thoughts about my work capacity and how I was doing. And I thought how much more I would trust this process if I was given a chance to talk. And if she would ask me questions about what I thought about how I was doing and what concerns I had or what questions I had. But it wasn't like that. So I did not trust the evaluation process on that job. And the fourth one is trusting in the environment. If you bring together a team and there's a conflict on the team and you want to have a conversation about it, they have to feel safe. They have to feel vulnerable and honest and can be honest. I remember going to a school where there was a lot of conflict between the principal and the staff. And when I walked in and the principal introduced me, I'll never forget this. The entire staff got up, turned their chairs around with their backs facing me and the principal. And it was one of the most challenging moments in my career because I knew they didn't trust anybody who was standing there with the principal. And I asked him to leave. I said, we have some things we need to talk about and work out. So would you please let us have this room to ourselves? And then I physically moved around to the front of where they were facing. And I said, I want you to know that what is said in this room stays in this room, that I am not here as an advocate for anybody. I am here to help you trust in the environment. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how that can happen. And that opened up a beehive of comments and concerns. And we were able to come up with a list of needs that the staff had to feel trust in the environment by the end of that conversation. But boy, it was powerful.
Oh man. Wow. Your last story just makes me think about our mission here at Your Clear Next Step to help people have better work days, and how many awful work days had gone by in that environment where that many people were not trusting in an environment where it was so toxic that they would feel it so necessary to turn their chairs around, right? That's thank you for helping. Thank you for helping. But your point about trusting the process, on a lighter note, I was thinking about a project management conference, a keynote speaker somewhere along the line in my project management career who was shared a gimmick thing that he did with executives once when they were bucking the process of project management. He says, you got to trust the process. And they're like, we don't trust the process. We just want the results. And it was something about, we just want more scope and less time and whatever it was. And we know, those of us who know project management know that there is a balance between how much you can get done in a limited amount of time for a limited amount of dollars. And he said, you got to trust the process. And he took him through this gimmicky exercise. He took there were 250 of us at this conference, and he some gimmicky thing with think of it an animal, and begins with a letter, and he, for I don't know, 10 15 steps, had us all going through, and he said, now look around at the piece of paper that you have, and in this room, every single person in this room either has down the word elephant, or you don't know how to count to the number 4. And it was because he had trusted the process, and we'd all gone through the same number of steps, and it was going through this process, and we would all have gotten to the animal that began with the letter E of elephant, and we all got to exactly the same thing because we trusted the process. And this is really, really interesting. But if you don't trust the process, if you don't trust in it and you're bucking it, then you're not going to open up to the idea that this process will help you. This process will get you there, that you'll get to the end results. And we're not even going to listen to the coaching. I'm not going to engage in the conversation even. I'm going to close down as a partner in this communication exercise with you. I'm going to grit my teeth, cross my arms, turn my chair, because I don't even trust the process of the conversation.
Right. The only objection I would have to that gimmicky exercise is you didn't know the process.
Yeah.
So you had to get to the end of it to feel any amount of trust at all.
Yeah.
People like to know the process that they're going through. So transparency in that is crucial.
For sure. So the fourth one, ending with a plan. So this is most important. This is one of the 4 things you've learned are most important about effectively communicating and coaching. First was listening. Second was question formation. Third was trust. And now the fourth one is ending with a plan. Let's talk about that.
Okay. When you are in a coaching relationship or communicating with someone, we're talking about intentional communication about a particular topic.
Mm-hmm.
It's important when the conversation is drawing to a close, or when the coaching session is drawing to a close, to summarize and ask the person, how do you feel about this summary? What would you add to it? What do you think about it? So that you can clear up any misconceptions or miscommunications. It's also important to ask if there are additional questions or thoughts they want to share, or concerns, and then leave the door open. They need to walk away with some kind of closure, but also an open door so that they know that they can come back and talk with you again about what they have been discussing. And you can do that with some, again, formed questions that are effective. One would be, how can I help you with your next steps? And they might say, I don't need any help. I clearly understand what I need to do now. And that's fine. But they know that you're there if they need you and they can come to you. A second one is, what are you taking away from our conversation? How is it different from when we started to talk to where we are now? And it's not necessarily where you are now, but where we are now in our conversation or our coaching. And then they have an opportunity to comment at that point. And finally, positive presuppositions. How has our conversation been helpful? And even if they say, I don't know, here is a wonderful line to use, and it works with kids and colleagues. If you did know, what would you say? Try this with your children. It is a remarkable tool. If you say to your child, how was your day at school? I don't know. Well, if you did know, what would you say? And they'll come up with an answer. It's absurd, but it works. It truly works if you did know. And what's wonderful about that is it's trust. You're trusting that they have something they want to talk about, and they can trust you and talk about it.
That's neat.
It's a great tool.
If you did know.
A great tool if you did know. Yeah.
What would you say? Oh, that's lovely.
I've used that one a million times with my kids and grandkids. If you did know, what would you say?
It's great. Well, I love your reminder. How can I help you with your next step? So I can't help but enjoy the relationship here between this and even the nature of what we do at our organization. The very name of our company, Your Clear Next Step. It was always about your next step, not ours, right? It's not about my step. It's always about yours, whoever we're working with. And it's about clarity before action, your clear next step. But it is about what's next. It's how can we help you with your next step, the very next thing you're supposed to do. So it's fun that's the ending with a plan. How can we help you do what's next? It's not just thinking about it. It's let's take that next step.
And some people will have a very short term plan when they walk away. I'm going to think about what we discussed. That's fine. Or some people might say, I'm going to approach my supervisor and have that important conversation about my evaluation or my pay raise or my work environment. So short term, long term, it doesn't matter, but they have a takeaway from your conversation, so it's meaningful.
Yeah, really neat. This is wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this would not be the Even Better podcast if I didn't ask my trademark question. What's making you even better these days?
I was very artistic when I was young. I even was going to go to the High School of Art and Design in Manhattan, but I decided not to and thought, I'll major in art in college, which I never did. So I'm taking an art class, and it is getting back to, I even opened up a box and my high school art supplies were still there. I mean, it was amazing. And I am doing something that I haven't done in many, many years that gave me great pleasure. I'm not as good as I used to be, but it's okay. It's okay.
Oh, wonderful. I'm delighted that you're back at it. That's great. That's great, Helene. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for making time for me today. And what a joy. If any of our listeners wanted to follow up with you more about either the coaching conversations that we talked about today or to learn more about the Iowa Literacy Council, how would they reach out to you?
They can reach me at Fein Solutions, FEIN Solutions @gmail.com. And I'd love to hear. And try that I don't know. And what if you did know? Because I want to hear from people.
Can't wait to try that. I can't wait to try that.
I want to hear from people that it worked.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. Well, if you are just joining us as a listener, you have reached the tail end. You got to rewind and start at the beginning because you have missed just a gem. Helene, thank you so much for your time today.
It's been so much fun. Thank you.
And to all our listeners, thank you so much for listening. And on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.